First, let me ask you a broad question about all these supranational and national goals that are trying to be met. They're not being met. Is it pointless having these goals in the first place because we're not getting where we need to be?
Well, we are making a lot of progress. When you look at the climate commitments of multilateral development banks or their financing on climate projects, this is year after year a record level. So what you see is more and more multilateral development institutions, including the European Investment Bank, are developing projects that are targeting climate objectives. But what you see also at the same time is the impact of climate change in the real life of people. That is also something that explains why we have more and more projects to finance.
In total, you have about $100 billion at your disposal for green and climate and development needs. You have about $50 billion. Where is that going?
So what we do at EIB is 90% oriented in Europe and 10% outside Europe. And what we have in terms of sharing of projects is 60% climate. The target we have in our objective is at least 50%. And the rest can be health projects, can be projects that have a significant impact, but not necessarily climate projects. The climate projects are mostly related to energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency. We can also do nuclear. And we have also projects that are related to innovation in the green industry.
So let me ask you about that, because there is a bit of a bifurcation. There's a lot of excitement about the new technologies that are getting developed, geothermal, battery technology, all around the world, from China to Europe to the United States, right? There's also a sort of a, if I can say, doomsday scenario out there, to use the Bill Gates word that sort of went viral. I'm curious, do you ignore the naysayers on this when you're looking at projects and just hope that each individual project makes a difference?
Well, what we try to do is to do two things at the same time. We think we need to scale up projects, and that's what we've done in Europe. Last year, for example, we have done 31 billion euros of renewable energy projects. And we do that because it's good for climate, it's good for trying to get electricity price down, and it's also good for securing our energy efficiency, energy security. But at the same time, you need to push for innovation, because you don't know what's going to be successful, but certainly some of these ideas will. And that's why we are also very active in supporting projects that have a high innovative content, like in the batteries, for example, for electric vehicles.
It is a particular environment right now. It seems to have changed over the last couple of years, and it's not just in the United States, it's elsewhere as well. So I'm curious, in this particular environment, are you finding it more difficult to mobilize private capital? What are you doing to mobilize more private capital when perhaps the appetite may not be there?
Let me say that at least what we have is in Europe, our government behind us. We have adopted last month our new climate strategy. It's a 5-year strategy, and it has been adopted unanimously by the 27 member states. And the first objective that we have is to stay the course, because we think we need to show that we care about climate financing. And the second objective is to try to make it more linked to competitiveness, but also to try to have the simplification, because it's true when you listen to SMEs that there are a lot of reporting that should be avoided, basically. And that's what we are trying to do. Now, we are going to have more means, including for adaptation. We are doubling our objective on adaptation. And that will help us also do more with the private sector in terms of blending, in terms of de-risking, do more projects with the private sector.
How much do you look at the regulations of a country before you go in? I mean, obviously regulations are quite strict in France and Germany, right? But what about the sub-Saharan countries that you're looking at and other countries you might be looking at?
Well, we look at projects, and when we have corporates, for example, what we do is trying to see if their strategy is consistent with what we expect in terms of Paris alignment, in particular, of our projects. Now, what I would say, though, is what we try to do is part of the issue is to have more capacity building, especially in poor countries, where you need to assess climate risk. It's not easy. And to transform climate risk into adaptation plan into projects. So we have put in place a program that is called Greening the Financial System that helps central banks, financial institutions in poor countries, especially in Africa, to put in place these kind of programs that will help them respond to your question about how can we make sure that we are all going in the same direction.
And finally, Mr. Fayolle, I have to ask you about your thoughts on that Bill Gates memo, because it did reverberate around the world. He seemed to be suggesting that there is a pile of money and some of it now has to come out of climate in order to make sure that children's health and welfare gets taken care of. Is that true or a false dichotomy?
Well, what I think is that it is true that you need to spend more money on vaccines, on health, and on poverty reduction. And that's what we try to do also as EIB, especially in the vaccines sector. But at the same time, what is also clear is that the poor countries, especially in Africa, are those who pay the highest price for climate change and its consequences. And that's why we need to spend also a lot of money on climate change and supporting projects that fight against climate change. And that's why I think you need to have both